Hey everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of The Completionist, where we don't just beat the games, we complete them. Sonic Superstars is a game that was on my radar last year for sure, and I'm excited today to let you know that yes, I've completed it, and yes, I'm done with it. So with that said, let's take a look at Sonic Superstars. If you're a Sonic fan, you've got a favorite Sonic game. Go ahead, say it out loud. Really, just for fun, just for you. Things become more real when you vocalize them anyways. All right, did you get that out of your system? Everyone's got their preferences, whether it's 2D or 3D, whether there are childs to take care of or not. Sonic Superstars is where the old and the new collide, in gameplay, in presentation, and in ideas. The usual thing to do is to bash where Sonic came from, but I'd rather talk about where Sonic left off. The last time we had a truly great 2D Sonic game, Sonic Mania. The year was 2017, when Mania helped Sonic and Sonic Team realize there's still a massive appetite for these games, proving that sometimes the voices of the fans are saying what producers need to hear all along. For the development of Sonic Superstars, Sonic Team creative officer Takashi Iizuka wanted to return to the series' roots, but still offer something fresh. In a Game Informer feature from August of 2023, Iizuka reveals that during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, he did what a bunch of us did during lockdown: have drinking parties on Zoom. He and Naoto Oshima, co-creator of Sonic the Hedgehog and founder of Arzest, got to talking about what they would want to see from the next generation of Sonic. And that leads to where we are now. The pitch for Sonic Superstars is basically, what if we took the classic Sonic gameplay, but modernized the visuals and mechanics? The result is, as journalist Dave Aubrey puts it, a new branch of a modern 2D Sonic timeline. It's a difficult thing to bridge the gap between people like me, who complete Sonic games on the regular and have grown up with the series, and for those for whom this is their first exposure. To me, this is where Sonic Superstars wobbles a little bit. It's a very polished game, but it doesn't feel purposeful in its intentions, which makes the completion process a little muddy. Sonic fans love a lot about it, but I don't find Superstars breaking my top 10. You'll definitely get more out of the experience if you're familiar with how Sonic and friends move from older titles, but new fans can find plenty to love too. And yes, everyone, we get it, blah, blah, blah. Transition to 3D, Sonic 06 was bad. Let's just move on. Let's stop that conversation. It doesn't make any sense or to add to the discussion about Superstars. I mean, you can keep harping about how 2 console generations ago they messed up 3D Sonic, but I'm going to judge Sonic Superstars for what it is. But I do want to draw attention to Sonic Frontiers, another game that I think a lot of folks missed what it was going for. Sonic Frontiers took huge swings to stand out, and it was actually one of my favorite games from 2022. I was excited by how Frontiers is trying to shape the future of 3D Sonic, but I ended up changing the format of my show a little bit. But I can only compare the scope, scale, and ambition of Frontiers to Superstars. Totally different games in totally different genres, aiming for totally different things. Sonic Superstars takes some big swings, but they're aiming for different targets altogether. The first thing you experience when you fire up the game is an amazing animated intro that perfectly captures a vibe. We get a glimpse of all of our major characters, and then Sonic uses the power of the Chaos Emerald to clone himself 100 times and save the day. It's bright and cheery and fun. It's a good indicator of what's to come, though not necessarily from a completionist's point of view. There are 3 modes in the main menu: story mode, battle mode, and time attack. A large majority of the trophies are tied directly to story mode, and the challenges contained therein. Battle mode is pretty much all online and was unavailable to me to even attempt to complete when I initially wrote this video. But even when the game finally came out, finding online lobbies was very difficult. The only way I could do anything was if I either self-boosted with another PlayStation or had a friend or two who was willing to play with me for several hours in a private lobby, because I couldn't find a lobby to begin with. There are no trophies or requirements tied to playing this mode at all, so I mostly focused what I could on the single player mode. Battle mode, as I eventually found out, can add dozens if not hundreds of hours to your gameplay if you truly care about finding a rare cosmetic collectible, as battle mode has rankings based on experience, and to a degree it has prestige rankings. Essentially, it's an online mode designed to keep players continually leveling up to earn pieces of aesthetics that you then apply to your custom robots. In my opinion, it's more of an add-on than anything. It is super optional. Story completion is about as standard as it gets for Sonic. Several zones, each broken up into different acts with sub-bosses and Eggman boss battles. There are bonus Chaos Emerald stages where you can unlock a special ability that is shared between all playable characters, and quite honestly, this is one of the biggest innovations Superstars brings to the table: an ability wheel. Might not sound like much, but it does make for some very cool moments. You can choose to control Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy Rose. Each one has their specialty, with some returning favorites. Sonic's got his drop dash, Tails can fly, Knuckles can glide through enemies, and Amy Rose can do a hammer double jump. It's a mix of moves from Sonic's past that will instantly feel familiar to anyone who's played Sonic 2 or 3. Beyond that, levels are pretty chaotic and fun. Bumper and booster-filled stages that you can blitz through in mere minutes if you follow the right path. There are a few other collectibles beyond the 7 Chaos Emeralds. You can collect medals, which are then used in the in-game shop to purchase robot parts to customize your battle avatar for battle mode. You can also earn fruit throughout the game, which is used to unlock special stages. Feed a big critter fruit, and you can play that stage. Some acts can only be completed with specific characters. You'll find no normal numbered acts like Act 1, Act 2, etc. And then suddenly you'll see Act Sonic or Act Amy, and you'll know that, hey, that is a Sonic or Amy stage only. Easy enough. Clearing every zone isn't that tough. I blitzed through my first playthrough in one night with a bunch of friends. But completion requires more than that. Finding the Chaos Emeralds and defeating Dr. Eggman is only the beginning. There is a whole additional campaign to complete, starring a different unlockable character, and a few trophies that added many hours to the total completion time. And then of course, battle mode. Sonic Superstars has some amazing ingredients to work with: local co-op, special unique powers, a fascinating take on new art direction, and customization. But whether it was due to a lack of developer intent or focus, I found the completion journey to be a slightly undercooked one when all was said and done. To say, as someone who is slowly dipping their toes into game dev and producing, I do not envy the uphill battle Sonic Team and Arzest face when creating this game. Development of any Sonic title faces an uphill battle. However, these people are professionals and have made a hell of a game that manages to make Sonic feel fresh and exciting, but still pays tribute to its past. It's a great move for 2D Sonic, even if it feels inconsistent at times. Let's get something out of the way here real quick. If the look of this game reminds you of Sonic Generations, that's a good thing. Oshima's favorite Sonic title of the last few years is Generations, and he drew on that game's art style as inspiration for Superstars. And as a Generations fan, this is an awesome choice. Chunky Sonic is back, and all of his friends look great too. I especially love Amy Rose's style, and the entire package feels very cohesive. Enemy designs are solid, reminiscent of Sonic games of the past. Eggman is at his roundest, a look I love to see. And it's Superstars only for the main cast. No side characters that people like to dunk on, though one of our villains, Fang the Hunter, is a very deep cut for Sonic fans. If you've played Sonic Triple Trouble on Game Gear or the extremely niche Sonic the Fighters, you may recognize this hat-wearing rodent. There is one new original character added to the roster: Trip, the armored-clad Sungazer lizard. It's to her credit that she fits right in. First, she appears to be teaming up with Eggman and Fang, helping the evil duo to snag critters and stuff them into robots. But completionists will get to see a new side of her in the form of extra post-campaign challenges and stages. As much as I love Sonic's original pixelated look and how Sonic Mania committed to recreating that, I think that Superstars' aesthetic is an interesting choice moving forward. It feels timeless in a very enjoyable way. To me, Superstars pins together a lot of what Sonic Mania was doing art-wise, but in a 3D way. So the music, however, I'm pretty mixed on overall. There are some really incredible tracks here. I love the music that plays during the Chaos Emerald stages. The main theme is very solid too, but the whole soundtrack doesn't quite stick. I wouldn't call it awful by any means, but it speaks to the lack of consistency that I noticed throughout the completion experience. Like, why are some tracks incredible bangers, but others feel like musicians just took the Genesis sound font and just messed around with it and said, that's it. Once again, T. Lopes, the homie, is back on the composing team, and I'm sure a lot of his music was considered and used for Sonic Superstars. But in my opinion, let's just say it's painfully obvious when it's a great T. Lopes track and painfully obvious when it's not. The zones feel very distinct, from visuals to unique level mechanics, and as a longtime Sonic fan, I appreciated how there was no Green Hill Zone as far as the eye can see. That's the true difficulty here, right? Players want something that evokes nostalgia, but still want to feel like they're getting a brand new experience. But I had the same mixed feelings about the level design as I did about the music. There are some phenomenal stages here, sandwiched between some absolutely just fine mediocre stages. Sonic Superstars makes an effort to provide novel experiences to the player with some updated gameplay ideas. How successful those efforts are, especially how rewarding they are for completionists, is another matter altogether. Design is rock solid until it isn't, and speaks to the overall mixed nature of this game. So how does Sonic Superstars give the classic Sonic formula a shot in the arm? There's the art direction, sure, and there is reverence paid to the original games. To me, I felt nostalgia, but I didn't feel like the whole experience was nostalgia bait. Yet it's those big swings I was talking about that make Superstars pop, even if they don't quite work as well as I wanted them to. For as much as I enjoyed playing this game, there are some very strange design choices, especially in the back half, that drags things down. The devs made the unimpeachable call that hanging out with your buddies in a Sonic game is a pretty cool idea, and I agree. If you're completing this game with friends in co-op, you might be surprised to hear that it feels very good to do so. Well, to a point, but let's start with the positives. When you're in active communication with your friends, you'll get to a flow state with Sonic Superstars that's almost magical. The way characters will move from the foreground to the background can be mesmerizing and captures what Sonic is like at its best. Chaotic yet smooth. It looks cool and it plays well. But if you're going full completionist, multiplayer can be a hindrance more than help. One buddy playing with you? Perfect. 3 or more? Pure anarchy, and not in a fun way. Completionists will benefit from working together, and having too many people on screen makes that practically impossible. Completing Sonic Superstars on your own can be occasionally frustrating, but those negative feelings easily multiply once the camera starts having to deal with too many players on screen at once. I'm really appreciating the bubbling mechanic here, where if one player falls behind, they'll teleport near instantaneously to whoever the game deems to be the furthest ahead. But sometimes who's furthest ahead feels a little arbitrary. Sometimes you want to go down a different route to pick up a shield, or some medals, or to defeat a golden enemy. Camera issues become more and more of a problem in later stages. The more players on screen, the further the camera zooms out, which makes sense on paper. But in more complicated later zones, and some late game boss battles too, this can be a problem. All that said, I do recommend playing Sonic Superstars in co-op, but I'd recommend limiting yourself to just 2 players. And be aware that there are some challenges that can only be completed in single player mode. Besides the big emphasis on co-op, the other big idea Sonic Superstars has is the Emerald powers. I like the concept of imbuing the Chaos Emeralds with special abilities. For too long, they've just kind of been these magic MacGuffins of the Sonic universe. But now it feels like there's an individual reason to collect every single Chaos Emerald, since each one gives the player a new move beyond just the supersonic transformation when you have them all. Once you find a big ring in a zone, you're then transported to a unique bonus stage where you have to swing your way towards a floating Chaos Emerald that is running away from you before the timer runs out. These bonus stages I like. The music rocks, and it's a different type of bonus stage than we've seen from the series. They're short and sweet, but they still feel satisfying to find and complete. With that said, the other bonus stages that exist in this game are kind of boring. They're boring just because they're essentially a rehashing and remixing of what the original Sonic bonus games were from Sonic 1 and Sonic 4, which we're not going to talk about. It's obviously not the exact same thing, but the concept is very similar. And these, while they are fun to do, don't feel like they have a true purpose because getting those medals aren't that important. You collect those medals to then buy parts for your robot so you can customize them the way that you want. And collecting all of the parts for your robot doesn't really do anything other than a fashion show if you want. I love the concept of the medals, but the exchange rate for them, not the funnest thing in the world. Going back to the powers themselves, I have a mixed reaction to. You activate them by pulling up a activity wheel and selecting what you want. You can regain your powers by hitting a checkpoint, so you aren't too limited in how often you use them. But the best way to describe the Emerald powers are, they're cool until they're not. Yeah, making 100 clones out of Sonic to clear out a screen full of enemies is awesome, but you never really need to do this on any given stage. And since we're here, on the whole many Sonic situation, right? Is that like the Prestige? Does every Sonic have its own consciousness? Where do they all go when the timer runs out? Does Sonic think about this? Or is he cruelly indifferent? Which one's the real Sonic in the end? Furthermore, some of the powers are rendered completely irrelevant by the existence of a little flying fox named Tails. One Emerald power lets your character travel up waterfalls. Awesome. You know who can also travel up near waterfalls without any special moves? Tails. Another power gives you the ability to see hidden platforms, allowing you to reach certain areas. You know who can reach certain areas most of the time without the need for hidden platforms? Tails. What's the point of the huge beanstalk while we're at it? What is the point of this thing? Or the other power that gives you an alternate fire power? Why? What's the use of these things? They're visually interesting and cool to a degree, I guess, but there just doesn't seem to be a big enough of a purpose. It sort of feels like the powers are just for Sonic to give him a little more movement utility, and that's a great idea in theory, and they still look and feel really neat. But I never felt like the game was asking me to use them in any meaningful way. From a design perspective, this makes sense. Finding the Chaos Emerald is optional in the first place, so they can't really make the powers integral to progression for the rest of the game. They each basically have very specific use cases. I started to notice that the game tells you when you're in a relevant area to use your powers, and that I really appreciated. It made me think about using the powers more often and differently when seeing them applied correctly. Otherwise, you don't really need them, or at least I couldn't really think of anywhere else to use them. The late game is where things go from really fun to stupid tough. After making it to the end of the campaign with just Sonic and friends, there's a pretty big jump in difficulty for the final fight against Eggman. It's a long battle with no checkpoints, and normally I wouldn't care about this, but the game does not teach you or show you how any other fights in the game work like this. So ultimately, you're not prepared. But after beating the main campaign, you unlock Trip's campaign. This is basically a hard mode. It's not a one-to-one playthrough with a different character. A lot more craziness, a lot more insanity. Everything from your previous campaign is unlocked, including your supersonic powers from collecting all 7 Chaos Emeralds. And if you've got all the Chaos Emeralds, Trip literally turns into a freaking dragon, which is both very rad and very funny. But even with all the preparation, the final boss fight at the end of Trip's story feels once again like being thrown into an exam that you did not study for. Between this battle and the Eggman fight, the difficulty spike is very real. I spent hours trying to overcome this fight against Fang, a preposterously difficult multi-phase battle full of one-hit kills. And these fights were difficult until I realized that you could in fact use your emerald powers in some extremely helpful ways. I felt the game never made it clear that the powers would be effective here in this specific instance, but once you figure out when to use them, it makes everything significantly easier to overcome. Joke's on me, I guess. I found it interesting that the two most unique things about Sonic Superstars end up being sort of inconsequential by the end of the completion experience. Co-op is fun, and it's nice to play a platformer where there's no friendly fire, so to speak, but again, any more than 2 players on screen and things just get a bit too hectic for my tastes. The Chaos Emerald powers are a welcome addition that shows Sonic Team is open to new ideas, but I don't think they end up contributing all that much to the overall picture. It's cool that these all exist. I wish they were implemented in a little more of a thematic way, or explicitly explain to the player what they can be used for, especially in the Trip campaign. As I sped through completion, I often questioned where I would land when it was finished. I love being surprised, especially when a studio puts a new spin on an old formula, and this game is often delightfully surprising. Sonic Superstars is largely successful at reviving the classic Sonic feel, one that can appeal to a new generation of players and satisfy old heads like myself. But for completionists, and more importantly myself, I don't really see Sonic Superstars being a game that I return to all that often. I had a couple of major standout issues and a handful of smaller complaints. Number 1, medals. Medals feel completely unimportant. They don't feel special or cool at all to find and collect outside of the fact of finding them and collecting them. After Chaos Emeralds, these are probably the second most vital collectibles in the game. They're necessary for buying stuff in the shop, but the more time I spent in the shop, the more I found myself saying, what's the point in all of this? Why even have a shop at all? Of course, I get why there's a shop. It's to extend the playtime, so you can make a fun avatar to use in battle mode. But the economy of the game feels kind of busted for the value of what you can purchase. You can grind out a ton of medals decently and quickly once you learn the routes, but it never feels fun to go into the shop and buy anything. Through playing the game over and over and over again with the battle mode online and just through osmosis of playing the game generally, I had more than enough medals to buy every single cosmetic in the game before I even prestiged once in the online mode. I guess what I'm saying is the online mode is just for fun with friends, so leave it to that. And hey, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe battle mode will take off and be super popular and customizing your avatar will be the hot new thing that the Sonic fandom enjoys. That would be cool. But now that the game has come out and the servers are online and I've grinded to 1 level of prestige, I still can't find a full lobby of people to play with on PlayStation 5. So again, what was the point of all of this? The second big standout issue for me, golden enemies. Every numbered act has a single golden enemy to find and defeat. There's a trophy tied to this. For the most part, I actually liked this challenge. You have to dial in and learn which path to take to reach the golden enemy, defeat it, take its token, and then finish the level. If you die, you have to re-defeat the golden enemy and finish the stage. Challenging, but fair. But then came the final zone. Not only is the golden enemy really difficult to reach in the first place, but this stage is long. Like, I'm talking 10 minutes too long. For a Sonic level, that's an eternity. Trying to survive in this zone became a trial in frustration and tediousness. I don't mind a tough challenge, don't get me wrong, but this single golden enemy made the trophy a slog, because I just kept dying and couldn't make it to the very end. Weirdly, both the Sonic and Friends campaign and the Trip campaign suffer from the same thing: ridiculous final boss fights. The final Eggman fight is one of the worst bosses I've ever played, ever, even beyond Sonic games. To be clear, at this point in time, when I am making this video, I completed this game before reviews or patches. But even keeping that in mind, there are camera issues. The floor can drop out unexpectedly, and the Eggman fight doesn't feel designed for multiplayer even in a tiny microscopic bit, which is confusing because for the most part, multiplayer throughout feels really good. I've talked about the bubbling and how the multiplayer feels chaotic but fun. Trying to beat this final challenge in co-op is not good. It leaves a real sour taste in the mouth. This fight with Eggman simply doesn't jive with the otherwise enjoyable multiplayer design. Completing this game with the 7 Chaos Emeralds does give you something really cool beyond the awesome supersonic transformations that are a staple at this point. I've already touched on it, but you can unlock a 5th playable character, Trip. The additional challenges that come with her campaign are pretty dang hard, but this type of bonus is one of my favorites. New ways to play are always super fun. These are, however, limited to the single player mode only and serve essentially as the game's hard mode. Beating Trip's levels unlocks the last story, a battle against a gigantic dragon. Now, this fight is not that bad, especially compared to Fang or Eggman. But again, upon first playing it, it isn't very clear what you're supposed to do in the battle. The game doesn't really illustrate that there's a timing element to the fight, something that hasn't been a factor thus far. One more example of mechanics being introduced here that don't factor in anywhere else. Trophy-wise, I was surprised by the amount of playtime I devoted to grinding and farming, which is kind of a bummer. There are several trophies that asked me to defeat enemies with specific attacks with specific characters. Another trophy asks you to collect 10,000 rings. I spent at least 5 hours on Bridge Island Zone killing enemies and earning rings. Most other trophies are pretty manageable. You don't earn anything extra for completing the game with every single playable character, nor do you earn anything for mastering any part of time attack mode, which, you know, is just for your own purposes of a score or ranking. Now, just to be clear, I don't think this game is a failure by any means. Outside of the camera issues, especially in that last final Eggman fight, I think that the idea to fold in co-op works well. The Chaos Emerald powers are a fun and novel twist, and I'd love to see this concept explored even further in the future. But outside of unlocking Trip, I didn't find there to be a very satisfying completion bonus. Sonic Superstars is compelling, but unless you're a die-hard classic Sonic fan, you can skip going after the Platinum Trophy. It's not hard, it's not even that bad. I still found it to be a fun experience with lots to enjoy. On the whole, I earned all 39 trophies in a little over 30 hours. I ended up grinding another 10 hours just to prestige one time. And I'd say Sonic Superstars is a solid game. It's not spectacular, it is serviceable, and that's totally fine. Personally, I like this game a lot, even as I pointed out its flaws. I'll leave it up to the Sonic audience at home to judge for themselves. That's all I can ever do. And I know the fans are passionate. I'm one of them. At the end of the day, I am of the opinion that there was a lot of effort put into bringing this game into light, but that effort wasn't always put towards making the game as good as it could be. And the price tag is pretty high for what you get. Still a fun time, but for the next brand new classic Sonic title, I hope that Sonic Team and whatever external developer they partner with will bring a bit more focus to the experience. So with that in mind, guys, I give this game my completionist rating of Finish It. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys very soon. Bye.